All right. Good morning, everyone. Today is the 11th of January, 2025. Welcome to Angel Wings online monthly retreat. This is our first one in year 2025. We are excited to start off this new year with a very fascinating subject, and that is personal freedom. So I'll make some comments as we move along, and please do interrupt if you would have any comments or questions. We'll keep going, for another hour or so, and then take a break, and then we'll try to go all the way until 12 o'clock if everyone is interested in doing so. So, having said that, each person in life is constantly trying to reach a state of freedom. Now, the concept of personal freedom is a deeply transformative idea that transcends societal constructs and touches the core of human existence. Let's see if we can understand that point first. You can see it on the line. You can see it on the screen here. Society has its own constructs, and they are necessary. They have their purpose, meaning, history, and development. But nonetheless, the question we are asking is that, is personal freedom deeply transformative? So I'm going to share with you my perspective on this, and then you are please welcome to look at this in your own way and certainly take it from there. In my own commentary on these ideas, absolutely, I would say that this is absolutely correct, that personal freedom is first of all personal. It's one's own freedom. Where else are we going to find freedom other than within ourselves? So this is one very fundamental concept, that freedom itself is personal, and due to the fact that it's personal, it is deeply transformative. It's a transformative idea conceptually, but it can be, and we are aiming for that in Angel Wing, is to move into a state of profound and internal, intrinsic transformation that may beneficially transcend societal constructs and can also touch the core of human existence, which is our third component, human upliftment. Right? So in this presentation, in today's workshop and presentation, we are going to explore the multifaceted nature of personal freedom, analyzing both internal and external dimensions. So there's two dimensions, internal as well as external. The aim is to provide, as much as we can, a comprehensive understanding of how individuals can achieve autonomy by overcoming constraints and aligning our lives with core values. To achieve autonomy means independence. There are, of course, in life all types of constraints, but we may be able to overcome many of them and then realign ourselves with our own core values, or values that we have gotten from somewhere else that we really resonate with. All right, so understanding personal freedom, defining personal freedom. Personal freedom refers to the capacity to make autonomous choices, free from external constraints and internal barriers. It involves the ability to live according to one's true self, fostering personal growth and fulfillment. Let's understand this, see if we can break that up a bit further. What are autonomous choices? It's an interesting question. What does that mean actually? So I'm going to do a little bit of an online research process here for you. This is really cool stuff through Microsoft Copilot. So I'm going to put right inside the screen here, autonomous choices. It is going to generate some information for me. Let's take a look at what it says about this. So the essence of making autonomous choices lies in the ability to act in accordance with one's inner convictions, rather than being swayed by external influences. Well, all right, well, let's break that up further. What are inner convictions? What does that mean, actually? We have certain kinds of inner convictions, but what does that possibly refer to? So inner convictions are deeply held beliefs and values that guide an individual's actions and decisions. Well, all right, we have values and beliefs that are deeply held. Do we know what they are? Are we even aware of what our values are, and to what extent the intensity with which they are held within our system? See, this is all part of awareness, right? So to open the question of personal freedom, to really discover personal freedom, there's a sequential process to go through, which is exactly what we're going to do right now, right? So again, let's go back just as a quick review. Personal freedom refers to the capacity to make autonomous choices. Do I have that capacity? Is that capacity developed? To what extent is it developed? These are all important questions. Okay, so this capacity develops when there is freedom from external constraints and internal barriers. Again, I have to be aware. To what extent are there external constraints? What are external constraints? What is a constraint? This requires careful, deliberate, contemplative probing. This is not just a flick of the switch or snap of the fingers that we can just unravel what is personal freedom. All right, there's many dimensions, and there's a way to open this very, very carefully and slowly. All right, so let's continue further. The ability to live according to one's true self. This is something we talk about all the time in Angel Wing. The core self, the core energy, the core essence. Well, whatever that may be, that's a matter of self-discovery, as Dr. Chaitanya has talked about before and in her recordings. And it's also a matter of a journey towards balancing and self-mastery, as we've talked about in the PTP program. And it's also a matter of living in resonance with the natural frequency of the true self, which would automatically, naturally foster personal growth and fulfillment. All right. Now, having said that, we're going to try to see very clearly what's meant by autonomous choices, inner convictions, and many other related ideas. So the essence of making autonomous choices, meaning free choices, exists in the ability to act in accordance with one's inner convictions, rather than being swayed by external influences. Now we have a dichotomy here. There's inner conviction to some extent or another, and then there are external influences. What is the bridge between them, and what is the separation between them? So if an individual like me, Sachin here, wants to make autonomous choices, I must be aware completely of my convictions and or develop them much further from where I already am. Then only I can act and live in accordance with my inner convictions. How am I supposed to do so otherwise? If there is confusion within, there is lack of clarity within, there's all kinds of mixture within, then an individual like myself or anyone else could easily be swayed by external influences. But that doesn't mean that external influences are meaningless. They certainly have to be considered in the right context. Maybe they can strengthen inner convictions. Maybe they can add to inner convictions. Maybe they can bolster inner convictions, or they could even potentially change inner convictions substantially. Many possibilities exist. Now, what are inner convictions? So we want to be really clear about the terminology. You can see it right on the screen here. I'm going to go through a live research process here with you because of the amazing programs available now in Office 365, which I have actually uploaded the Copilot inside here. So that really takes our contemplation to a much further level. So inner convictions are deeply held beliefs and values that guide an individual's actions and decisions. All right. So in a meditative sense, am I aware of my beliefs and values, and are they deeply held? Take an example. Let's look at some examples of these things. Let's say I have a value that says I believe in vegetarianism, something like this. All right. So I have that value. To what extent do I hold it? Is it deeply held? Then if I'm holding it deeply, my actions would be such that I'm going to have only a vegetarian diet. But some people may not hold it as deeply. They could have some exceptions. A couple of times a month, have some non-vegetarian food. Okay, I'm a vegetarian most of the time, but about 10% of the time I have some flexibility. Eat some shrimp, eat some fish, eat some this chicken, this, that, etc. Right? Okay, so again, it could be deeply held that I'm a vegetarian 80% of the time and 20% of the time I'm not a vegetarian. That could be a deeply held value, or it could be just a mixed value. You see, so these are inner reflections. And then the question is about freedom. If you take that vegetarianism as an example, someone might say, well, I really want to be vegetarian completely. I ought to be, but I'm not. Well, okay. So is one's desire sabotaging one's freedom? We talk about the TEMDE, thought, emotion, memory, desire, energy. Are our desires themselves, due to their contradictory nature, sabotaging inner freedom, personal freedom? It's an interesting question. Okay, but let's go a little bit further here. So inner convictions are formed through personal experiences. They're formed through our own reflections, which is what I just talked about right now, and some type of understanding of one's true nature. So they act as a compass, steering individuals towards choices that resonate with their authentic self. So it's a compass, right? What's a compass? Compass is used north, west, east, south, etc. when we are traveling in a direction. All right? So the convictions we have can serve as a compass because they guide us towards a specific destination. And what is the destination we're talking about today? That destination is personal freedom. So the inner convictions we have act as a compass, steering us towards choices that resonate with our authentic selves, with our authentic sense of who I am, with our ethics and morality, etc. And it could steer us regardless of external pressure. So external pressure could divert the individual from that goal that one may have of personal freedom, but it's possible that external pressures could damage personal freedom, could divert us away from personal freedom. But that's only possible if and only if an individual, I'll just say Sachin here, using myself as an example, is very, very clear, lucid, crystal clear about what is personal freedom for me. If I'm not clear about that, if there's some mixture in that, I will easily be swayed either by my own desires or by external pressures, or all three, or both of them. Very interesting. Very important to see this. So conviction and acting upon inner convictions, embracing and acting upon inner convictions, it requires courage and clarity. That's what I just mentioned, lucidity. Without courage and clarity, there is no way to fully act upon inner conviction. And without acting upon inner conviction, there is really no way to make autonomous choices. And without making autonomous choices, there is absolutely no way of ever reaching personal freedom. You see, so there is a pyramidal link there. At the base, you've got inner convictions. Then on top of that, autonomous choices. On top of that, personal freedom. To get to personal freedom, inner convictions lead to autonomy. Okay. You see, now, of course, there are external constraints. There's all kinds of external constraints in life. That's the way life goes, right? But we have to be aware of them, deal with them. You can see it on the screen here. There are societal pressures, legal restrictions, and cultural norms. And we have to be aware of all of them. Enhancing personal freedom means what? Recognizing and addressing both internal and external constraints. Until internal constraints and external constraints are not recognized, we are not aware of them, we will not be able to move into the dimension of autonomy and realize personal freedom. It will not happen. Let's take a look at what these are. Let's use our tools here to open this a little bit further, just to gain a little bit of a perspective here. And I mean, we already know that there's all kinds of external constraints, right? We already know that. But the question is, how far do we allow them to influence us? So what are societal pressures? Well, societal pressures refer to the expectations and norms imposed by the society in which we live. Is there a society within which we live? Yes, of course. Of course, there's a society within which we live. We don't live in isolation, but there are societal pressures, right? So these societal pressures refer to expectations imposed by the society, norms imposed by the society within which we live. That also has a purpose. There might be a lot of benefit in that. There probably is. And there could also be a tremendous amount of constraint, maybe harmful conditioning and limitations that come out of societal pressure. So it can go both ways. I just yesterday was watching a documentary on cults. It's in the Great Courses Plus. If you have a subscription to that, maybe we can go over some of that material at some point. That how cults form. Well, what's the definition of a cult? Many people, they go into some kind of a cult because they don't want to be part of the mainstream society. They rebel against it. And there's a whole list of these cults that have come about in the history of humanity. But then how would you even define a cult? So it's a group of people that doesn't want to follow the norms of society. They want to follow something else completely. Right? So how is that defined? How do scholars go into that? Another massive area. We could spend years studying that. People have, in fact. The point is, for our purposes today, societal pressures definitely exist. What are they? They are expectations and norms that are imposed by the society right from childhood. That's a fact, whether they're religion-based or culture-based or food or dance or language or ethics, morality, it could be anything, right? Family norms, family dynamics, all kinds of phenomena are active in this. So societal pressures, these are massive. Right? So these pressures can manifest in many ways, such as the need to conform to certain behaviors, roles, and standards. Now, see, this goes back into developmental psychology. This sentence here, you can see that right on the screen. I'm doing this live with you. This is a lot of fun to do it this way because it really makes things very much alive for us, right in the present. So it's a lot of fun to do it this way. So these pressures can manifest in various forms, such as the need to conform to certain behaviors, roles, or standards. Children are taught, they are made, I would even say forced, rightly or wrongly, however you want to see it, they are forced to conform to behaviors. You have to, right? If you have a child being sent to an elementary school, that child is set in a certain pattern. They have to eat lunch at a certain time. They have to do their certain exercises. This is all discipline. But it is a conformity to a pattern that has been prefixed inside the school system, inside the society in general. What if you didn't have that pattern? Now, are we saying that we're restricting a child's freedom by placing that child in that pattern? Or are we saying that the child is eventually going to discover considerable amount of freedom by the constraints of that pattern to begin with in preschool, elementary school, middle school, high school, etc., college, all the way down the road? There's always patterns in every area of life, and there are the demand, the expectation to conform to behavior, to roles, to standards. Go to a job somewhere. There's a culture in the job. There's a certain standard to uphold. There are roles to fulfill. Are we ever really free? It raises this question. It's coming to my mind right now. I'm just sharing with you what's openly coming to my mind. Is human being ever truly free from all these societal pressures? And if so, what would that be? If you look at the religious traditions of the world, the monks and sages and the renunciates who leave the normal frame of life and they go into monasteries or ashramas and other places like this, isn't that what they're trying to do? They want to get out of the societal pressures. They want to live a very different kind of life. Yeah, they have an institution that supports their food, clothing, water, shelter, religious study, but they don't want to be stuck inside the societal pressures and cultural norms that they want to. They are following some other type of structure altogether. Aren't they trying to move out of the societal patterns that they don't accept. They may not say it openly, but they don't want to. Whether they're nuns or certain renunciate priests or the monks on Mount Athos, as I mentioned before, or the sadhus in India, or the different people living in the ashramas. There's not a whole lot of them in the world, but they're there all right. And isn't that what they're trying to do? Is that just an escape from the world? Is that something wrong to do? Is it something right to do? You see, there are questions upon questions that come about when we are asking about personal freedom. It is a most fascinating study, and I don't know that we've actually talked about this in this much detail. My thought is that we could spend, most of this year, we could make all of our monthly retreats just on this subject and really just stay with this subject. There's so much involved in this. And it's all ties together. It's all ties into self-mastery and personal freedom, and it ties into transformation. It ties everything together anyway, but maybe it's good to stay with this one subject all the way through this year, all the way into the retreat at the end of the year, the Killen's Pond retreat. This is a massive question, right? Everyone wants to be free. Even children, when they are placed in schools, they don't like the constraints that they have. Most children don't. They cannot wait to go into recess. Who likes constraint? Nobody does. But they have to go through that maybe to discover a much greater development, that those bonds in the schooling system, in the housings, in the home, there's obedience in the home, the rules to follow in the home, all of those kinds of things in home and at school. There are expectations, there are norms, there are behaviors, there are values, there are beliefs, there's traditions. They all have to follow them. And there's a lot of development that has to happen. And then you have all these clinical diagnoses like ADHD and oppositional defiant disorder, kids who don't want to follow those norms. They become defiant towards their parents, teenagers, let's say. They become belligerent, they become violent even at times, right? Then you wind up calling crises and you wind up calling this person and that. The police get involved. I mean, I used to work in that field, so I've seen all those things. What is all that? It is a drive internally to break out of all kinds of bondages. Nobody wants bondage. Nobody wants binding, and nobody wants a boundary. This is just a contention Sachin is making. Nobody really wants that. But maybe as we develop and mature, those boundaries and those so-called conformities that the society or family or schooling places, like what Freud called the superego, that could lead to a much greater inner freedom or personal freedom, that those boundaries in the schooling system bring about the freedom to gain knowledge and wisdom on a whole array of subjects. But if you didn't have that structure of discipline and of conformity and of testing and all those things, the schedules and whatnot, if you didn't have that, a person, how are they supposed to gain knowledge and wisdom of physics and chemistry and biology and mathematics? And how are they supposed to gain that? Just by sitting in nature? Although nature has everything in it, there's no access to those ideas unless one goes through a disciplined process. So it's fascinating that from childhood, there's all kinds of conformity, all kinds of pressures, all kinds of roles that one adopts. But eventually, as evolution occurs, inner evolution and growth occurs, one transcends those limitations into a much greater vision. But those limitations were necessary so that one can transcend them. If one doesn't go through middle school and high school, one cannot graduate out of high school. The whole purpose of going into the public school or private school system and getting a high school diploma, what is the purpose of going through elementary school, middle school, high school, as an example? Why? So that one can get out of that system. One can grow out of that system. One can evolve out of that system. The purpose is not to be stuck in that system. Now, using that as an example, that could be true in every area of life. That could be true across every domain of life. That every domain of life is an opportunity to grow beyond that domain, not destroying that domain, leaving it alone, but seeing its boundary, its limitations, and taking a leap further. When a person graduates from high school, they go through the graduation ceremony. They are no longer a student of that high school. The moment they get that diploma in their hand, they are no longer a 12th grader or a student of that school. They are an alumni. They are a graduate, a high school graduate or a college graduate. Doesn't mean that they're destroying the institution, but the purpose of the institution is to get out of the institution, not to be thrown out of the institution, but to graduate out of the institution, not to be expelled from the institution, not to damage the institution, right? Assuming that the institution is bona fide, ethical, etc. Some institutions, which have been there in human history, are highly oppressive, highly damaging. There's lots of examples of those, and people have rebelled against them, fought against them, got their rights, things like that, like the institution about voting or slavery and all those other kinds of things, which are very stark examples, right? So it again is an open question of what is personal freedom. What is that actually? And that's what we're trying to unravel here. Let's go a little bit further. So, societal pressures often stem from collective values, collective beliefs, and collective traditions. You see this next line here. Okay, it's beautifully written. Amazing. All this stuff, these new tools we have are just fantastic. Okay, so you can see here, that these societal pressures stem from collective values. Okay, we talked about this before, I think, when we did some of the ethics presentations. What if there's a collective value that everyone who is taller than 5'10" is to be killed? Can you imagine that? What if 90% of the United States population believed that? They elected representatives in the governments at all levels who believed that, and they instituted such law because that's a collective value. You see, just because massive number of people believe a certain thing, does it mean it's ethical? You see, so there could be collective values that are highly damaging, highly unethical, highly immoral, but the majority thinks it's moral, it's ethical, it's the way it should be. What if, I mentioned it before also, what if a society says anybody over age 60 is to be put to death? Then what? Then what? Is that acceptable? You could try to justify that. There was actually, I don't know if anybody's a Star Trek fan, but if you are a Star Trek fan, in the next generation episodes, they created an episode on this point only. The ship goes to a planet where everybody who is over 60 goes through some special ceremony, and then they are basically killed, and it's a celebration. And so the population never increases over 60. There's a whole episode on that, actually. I can give you the reference if you want. A little bit of a side diversion there. Star Trek fans. Star Trek is amazing. There's a lot of philosophy and psychology and spirituality and physics. Everything is rolled in those series. So if you haven't watched them, you can try to watch it and see if that something that you might find interesting. My point is that society may believe, the majority may believe a particular thing. Like at one point in the United States, there was the whole belief that slavery was completely ethical, moral. Even in the Bible, there's some verses in there somewhere that talk about slavery. That is perfectly okay. The Old Testament doesn't have any issue with slavery. Think about this. You see, in the Indian culture, the caste system, for example, the upper caste degrading the lower caste and keeping them there, using the law of karma which is a metaphysical idea, but using that for oppression. I actually wrote a scholarly paper on that in Journal of International Social Work years back in 1994 with another professor. The two of us had pulled that together. Oppression, right? To use even spiritual ideas like the law of karma, which is a highly metaphysical idea, and to use that to oppress those who are in the lower strata and to keep them there, and then to instill a highly conditioned belief that this is who they are, this is who they will be, this is who they were. They cannot progress. They have to stay at that level and never progress out of it. That is still there in the Indian society even today. Even today it is there. Even though they've tried to change through laws and all that, the psychology doesn't change that easily. And people brought up in that strata, they kind of say, this is my place. I mean, I remember years back when I visited India, some of the people who were doing some of the cleaning in the home, I would say to them, why don't you sit at a table with us? Just sit. They would be hesitant. They would sit on the floor. They wouldn't sit at the same level even. If I'm sitting on a sofa, they would sit on the floor. So I actually sat down on the floor with them, and they would feel highly uncomfortable that this person who has come from the US is now sitting on the floor with me. They would feel emotionally distressed by my doing that. And I did it deliberately, but they were not comfortable with it. See the level of this massive, hideous conditioning. There is no other word for that. This is my own commentary on this one. So this kind of stuff is there all throughout the world. This process of the societal pressures, societal conditioning is so deeply ingrained. I really question if anybody is at all free. I really question that. And this goes back to like J. Krishnamurti and all. That's why he absolutely stated, I want to set man unconditionally free. Man meaning human being. To what extent are we heavily conditioned by all this? And then perhaps there are things to take from the conditioning, from the collective values and beliefs and traditions, but they have been utilized for oppression, for suppression, for all kinds of domination, which we see at the economic strata, we see at the family strata, because anybody who is born in this world is born into a hierarchy. A child is born into a familial hierarchy. And this is the challenge of life, that to be able to move through the societal conditioning and the entire structure and to evolve out of it into a state of freedom is the real question. Is that possible? Is that worth pursuing? You see, because we can see that the influence of societal pressures can be profound. Not only can it be profound, it is profound. It is absolutely profound. And it affects individual choices. Individuals may not have a choice at times. Or what they think that they're choosing is coming out of conditioning, not out of their own free will. It's coming from the society telling the person what you should choose. And then the heavily formed neuropsychological patterning from societal influences that one has emotional difficulty even thinking or acting in another way, like the example that I gave about sitting on the ground with someone who was coming out to do some cleaning in the home. These are big questions. There's no one answer. Massive philosophy books have been written on these questions. Massive. I can show them. If you come to my place, I'll show them to you. There's no one answer to any of this, but the question is worth contemplating deeply and profoundly, and our own contemplation is necessary in a group as well as with ourselves, as well as with these ideas, with retreats and in so many other ways to increase our contemplative ability, our reflective ability, so that we can ask the question about where is personal freedom, what is meant by personal freedom, is there even such a thing as personal freedom? Or are we doomed into the conditioned patterns of the society? And this is part of the external barriers. Now, there's legal restrictions, cultural norms. I want to talk about that next. I want to just take a little pause here for any comments, questions, etc.